Good evening, and welcome to Sunday Night Live. Hey, I want to get a fist bump here. This little man drew a picture this morning of the preacher in the pulpit, and he gave him a whole lot of hair. Way to go. But I think his mama was wondering, are those little squiggly lines hair, or are they emotional energy? We're going to go with hair. Hair. It is great to be here tonight, isn't it? We start a brand new study as we dive into the book of Philippians. Now, I'll tell you, Philippians, if you don't know this already, that's all right. Your mind's going to be opened up to a whole new beauty. Because the book of Philippians is like no other book in the New Testament. Oh, I know. If you read it with a surface read, you're going to find some of the same characteristics. It's going to talk a lot about grace. It's going to talk about faith. It's going to talk about Jesus. It's going to talk about God. It's going to talk about different things we should and shouldn't do. All the surface stuff's the same. But when you really read it, the book of Philippians is special because it's got a different group of recipients. And they mean something different to the author, which is the Apostle Paul. Richard Rogers, who I was privileged to learn from in school, and he's the one that every day, we all have our favorite professors. And every day when I'd go to class, I'd just wonder, what's Brother Richard going to say today? What's going to pour from his lips that thrills my soul? One of the things he said is he said, all of you will probably get stuck with a Corinth in your ministry. But he said, it's all right as long as you all get to preach for a Philippi. You understand what he meant by that? No offense, Corinth, but the Corinthian church, they were constantly writing things to others to criticize Paul and questioning his apostleship and wondering if he really was authentic and if he was as good as Peter and Apollos and all the rest. And Paul lovingly and patiently worked with them. But, Philippi. Philippi was the church of churches. And he writes back and you can feel the affection rolling off his lips and off his pen as he pours out words that are really words written to dear friends. And that's seen in the introduction as he begins, because you have to start there, right? When you've seen somebody you haven't seen in a long time, if they're an acquaintance, you greet them in one way. But if they're your best friend, you greet them in a totally different way. One may be a handshake and the other one is a bear hug, right? Or one of those lift you off the ground and twist you around kind of hugs, If a letter could be summarized in one of those ways, the letter to the Philippians is not so much a handshake. Now the letter to Corinth, it sort of is. But the letter to the Philippians is a bear hug, lift you around and kiss and hug and just talk about how much you missed each other. Because there is real affection. Really, the letter to the church of Philippi is beautiful because it depicts how church is supposed to be. How relationships are supposed to be. It's supposed to be a community of dear friends, of brotherly love. And that's what we see as Paul writes to the church. The great church of Philippi. Now when we dive into this text, we're going to see that it's written to dear friends. And when you think of what a friend is, there are lots of definitions that people give in our world. We have Facebook friends. And I'm not sure exactly how many I have. I know it's not 1,000 because I said that one time and my kids looked it up and wanted to point out that I was exaggerating. So I don't have quite that many. But I was wondering tonight, Lenora and I, we were on the way to church and I had my phone out and I said, there was a preacher on there and he'd been preaching for a congregation. I'd never heard of the congregation. I didn't really know who he was. He was my friend, but I didn't really know who he was. But I felt bad for him. He said that he'd been asked to step down and he was pouring out his heart. I don't do that on Facebook myself, but a lot of people do. But it bothered me because I'm like, who is this guy? My heart hurt for him, but I didn't really, he's my friend, but I don't really know him, There are people that are acquaintance friends, people you know who they are, you know their face. But if I were to ask you, what are their hobbies? What thrills their soul? What's the most exciting thing to them in their life? You'd be like, I don't know. I mean, they're friends, but are they really friends, you know? Well, the friends that the Apostle Paul is going to address here are real friends. A British newspaper did a survey, and they asked their readers to submit definitions of what real friendship was. These are some of the top answers they received. They said a real friend is one who multiplies joy, divides grief, and whose honesty is inviolable. That was a good one. A real friend is one who understands our silence. That's a good definition. A real friend is a volume of sympathy bound in cloth. A real friend is a watch that beats true for all time and never runs down. I like that one. But the one that won the contest, the winning definition was a real friend is one who comes in when the whole world is going out. That's a real friend. That is exactly how the Apostle Paul felt about the church in Philippi. So as we read through these first 11 verses again, just let those words, with that in your mind, the relationship between Paul and this church, where he'd worked, where he'd labored with them, where he'd loved them, where he'd eaten in their homes, where he'd spent time with them. Just listen for the relationship. And at least to me, it makes the words come alive. As he says, Paul and Timothy, bond servants of Jesus Christ, to all the saints in Christ Jesus who are in Philippi, with the bishops and deacons. He says, I thank my God always for you, upon every remembrance of you. He says, I thank my God, grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine, making request for you all with joy. In every prayer of mine. We couldn't say that of everybody in our life, could we? But these are people that are constantly on his heart, making requests for you all with joy, for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now, and being confident of this very thing, that he's begun a good work in you, will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. Just as it is right for me to think this of you all, because I have you in my heart. For as much as in my chains, and in the defense and the confirmation of the gospel, you all are partakers with me of grace. For God is my witness, how greatly I long for you all with the affection of Jesus Christ. And this I pray, that your knowledge would abound more and more with all discernment, that you would know the will of God, that you may approve the things that are excellent, that you may be sincere and without offense in the day of Christ, being filled with the fruits of righteousness which are by Jesus Christ, to the glory and the praise of God. Do you hear the affection? He says it there, doesn't he? With the affection for you. He says, if you boil it down, you know that I love you. And you know that I miss you. And so as Paul starts off this grand letter with such profound truths, because you understand, Paul is going to be able to speak higher theology in the book of Philippians, because he doesn't have to deal with any of the junk. You understand what I mean? He doesn't do this. Philippians is vastly different than some of the other letters. The book of Galatians, he's having to deal with why we don't have to follow the law anymore. So he's going through this big, theological treatise on why Things they should already know, but he's got to go back over, well, you don't need the law anymore. Romans, he's got to lay out this constitution of Christianity, it's been called, which is basically the entire system of Christianity, again, for the Roman church. Corinth, he's got to deal with things like infighting. He's got to deal with immorality that they're allowing to go on in their midst. All this other stuff. So he doesn't get to really pour out his heart to the bigger things. The things of what we might call high theology. Beyond just the what, but pour out his heart in regard to the why. Not what do we need to do to serve the Lord, but why? What's our motivation? What's his motivation? You see, this is a book to people to whom he has relationship about what it means to have relationship with the divine. So what does he tell them, first off, in this introductory section? Well, first of all, the first 8 verses outline how he is overwhelmingly thankful for them. How very special they are to him. Verse 5, in verse 5, you'll note that he begins by, I'm in a new Bible, and I can't find anything. Y'all have to be patient with me tonight. Lenora left my Bible at home. Okay, for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this very thing. So the first thing he talks about, their participation in the gospel. He is thankful because this is a group. The church at Philippi have been his partners all the way, all of his life. You know, he's going to talk about, if you look over in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, look at 2 Corinthians 8, 1 through 5. He'll talk about the church at Philippi. He says, moreover, brethren, we made known to you the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia, that in a great trial of affliction and abundance of their joy and their deep poverty, they abounded in riches of their liberality. For I bear witness that according to their ability, yes, and beyond their ability, they were freely willing, imploring us with urgency that we should receive the gift and fellowship of the ministering of the saints. So he talks about the churches of Macedonia, and guess where Philippi is? Heart of Macedonia. That's where the Macedonian call came from. So when he's talking about Macedonia, he's talking about Philippi. And he says the church at Philippi, even though they were poor, they were the best givers that could be. And why? Because they love me. And they love my mission, and they wanted to see it accomplished. And he said, and I told them, no, you don't have it. You can't do this. And they insisted. That's the way they were. Because they said, we want to do it with you. We want to be a part. And let me tell you, that endears folks to a preacher. Lenore and I, if you were to ask us where in your travels and in the years and where you've preached, we have dear friends everywhere we've been. No one's been more blessed. Young men, there's no greater job than being a preacher. No offense to all the other jobs. All the other positions that you men hold is wonderful. But a preacher is the creme de la creme. Because you get to work with God's people every day of your life. You get to work with people that aren't just your co-workers, but every one of them are your friends, or can be. It's beautiful. But if you were to ask us, where in your life do you just feel that partnership? It would be a little place called the Mesquite Church of Christ in O'Donnell, Texas. Okay, now, I started preaching at the Mesquite Church of Christ in O'Donnell, Texas when I was 21. Preached there about a year and a half while I was in school at Sunset School of Preaching. And I'll tell you, I also had the most successful ministry I've ever had, because in a year and a half, in fact, the first day I was there, the church grew by 30%. Because Lenora, I, and Rianne made it 11 instead of 8 people that went to church there. Okay? The church, this is true. There's no city around O'Donnell, Texas. It is a cotton field. There's the church building, and the only bathroom is at a member's house a half a mile down the road. It's the truth. Want to go to the bathroom, you get in the truck, and you go a half mile down the road. It's all right, they left it open. Nobody ever locked their doors there. And those were I'm telling you, those are the sweetest people that you've ever met in all your life. And the only reason that church didn't grow to be gigantic is because nobody lived there. Because if they did, if anybody ever moved in, you'd never want to leave. These people are absolutely the best people ever. And we went, and every Sunday afternoon, Lenore and I would go to Eva's house, or we'd go over to Carl and his wife, Frances. Carl and Frances, was that her name, Frances? Or Adolph, remember Adolph's house? These are all farmers right there. Of the 8 members, that about half the congregation I just told you. We'd go stay at one of their houses, and they'd fix us lunch, and we'd nap. And, you know, we're 21 years old. We don't know anything, and they're just as sweet as can be. Make me pies, rhubarb pies, just like Miss Catherine. Oh. And, you know, they were so patient when you're learning how to preach, and you just treat us. And then when we got ready to leave, we preached our last Sunday there. I had taken a job in Pendleton, Oregon. We had Rhiannon, just this little baby. We had everything we had in the world in the back of a pickup truck. Had nothing. And they gave me my last check, which I think was $75 a week, and another envelope. And they said, that second envelope, open it up in the car on your way back to Lubbock. Don't open it now. Open it in the car on the way back to Lubbock, on your way back. And they said, and make sure you always call us if you're ever going on a mission trip, or if you ever, always call us. Because we love you. And we want to be a part of your life. And we opened up that envelope on the way back, and you got to understand, 22 years old, had nothing in the world. And there was the biggest check we'd ever held in our life that said, we want you to have a down payment for a house. And I didn't quite do the whole down payment on the first time, but it helped. And every mission trip I went on, until they've all died off now, I think. I think they're all gone. But 4 times I went on mission trips through the years, and I wrote one little letter to the O'Donnell Church of Christ. And half my trip came in the mail within 2 weeks. To me, those are the finest people. And it isn't because of the checks, you understand. It's because they love me, and they supported me, and they want to be a part of my life and my ministry. And I believe that in some way, every good thing that I've been able to touch and accomplish has partially been because they invested in a young, dumb, inexperienced preacher. Understand? And that's exactly how the Apostle Paul felt about these folks. He says, you partnered with me. You helped me. You will forever be a part of who I am. In verse 6, he talks about the blessings that God will bestow, being confident of this very thing, that he has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Christ. He talks in other places in 1 Corinthians about their poverty. He talks about how they gave even though they didn't have it. But here he says, listen, I know this. As an apostle, I've prayed, and I am confident that people as good as you, God always makes it right for. God always makes it right. So he doesn't just pray for where they are. He prays for the blessings that he believes God will pour out on his dear friends, for the people that they've been for him. And then in verses 7 and 8, he says, just as is right for me to think this of you all, because I have you in my heart, and as much as both in my chains and the defense and confirmation of the gospel, you all are partakers. That word, partakers, is an intimate word. Partakers. That is a word of empathy, not just sympathy. That is a word of understanding. That is a word of being a partner. And so he prays for them because they're more than just friends. They have been confidants. They have been intimate partners through every part of his ministry. What made them partners and friends? It was that approachable spirit. You see, I don't think the Apostle Paul had any problem, any need in his life approaching the church at Philippi. Never a problem. They were approachable. I read about Thomas Jefferson in one obscure instance in his life. He was with a group of men, and there had been a terrible flood, and the rains had come, and they had to ford this treacherous river on horseback. And several were fording across the river, and just as Jefferson was about to go into the water on his horse, there was a man who was there. He was not mounted. He didn't have a way across, but he'd been watching men as they entered into the river and faced that danger. But he waited and he asked Jefferson, he said, "Sir, will you ferry me across?" And sure enough, Jefferson agreed. He took him and he placed him on the back of his horse, and even though it was twice as difficult and dangerous as before, they made it across the river. He let the man off. He was thanked for it. And then someone asked the stranger, he said, "Why did you choose the president to ask?" He said, "Oh, I didn't know he was the president." He said, "All I know is that I saw other men going across, and as I looked at their face and studied them, they had a no face. And he had a yes face." You know what I mean by that? Approachable, being open, being engaged and interested. That's how the church at Philippi was. I think they were the kind of people that when they saw Paul, they tried to find every way they could to be a part of his ministry. In every way they could. Because they wanted to be partners. So he is overwhelmingly thankful for them and who they have been in his work and in his life. The second thing that he prays for in this introduction is he prays for their continued growth. In verse 9, it says, "And this I pray, that your love may abound still more and more in knowledge and all discernment." Abounding love. A love that is rooted in knowledge and in wisdom, which is supposed to be the end result for every mature believer. 2 Peter 1, 5 through 8 says, "And your faith, add to your faith virtue, to your virtue knowledge, to your knowledge self-control, to self-control perseverance, to perseverance godliness, to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness love. For if these things are yours, you will abound, and you will be neither barren or unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ." So Peter's progression there as he lists all of these virtues, Christian ideals, and the last one he says after brotherly kindness is real love. Because that's the ultimate objective of every congregation, isn't it? And they achieved it. This is a church that's there, but he still prays that may even build more, because that's a church that's truly impactful. Not just with one another, but in this world. A church that achieves true, abounding love. The second thing he prays for, he says in verse 10, "That you may approve the things that are excellent, that you may be sincere and without offense in the day of Jesus Christ." Satisfactory was not good enough in Paul for his dear friends. He didn't pray that they have satisfactory faith, that they have adequate faith. He prayed that they have excellent faith. And that is such a powerful principle of who we are to be. We're not just supposed to be a people who find the median and live it, who find the minimum and always achieve it, who are satisfied with mediocrity or adequacy. He said, "No, I pray that you are excellent." And they already had been. But that they grow in that grace. And then finally, verse 11, "Being filled with the fruits of righteousness, which are by Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God." Filled with the fruits of righteousness. In other words, that their labor, that their love, that their partnership, that it all result in abounding fruit. Fruit of all kinds. Fruit of outreach, fruit of relationships, fruit of blessings. That the Lord reward them with the fruit for their labors. What I want you to see most from this section, as we went over and over it, is that Paul's not just writing any other letter. This letter's special. This letter signed with X's and O's. Because this letter is truly to his friends. it always should be. Amen. We haven't been here all that long, but Lenore and I have already been impressed that this is a place where I believe people can make not just lifelong friends, but eternal friends. Because there's nothing else in this world that matters. The reality is the only thing you can leave this world with is each other. What a blessing. Tonight, if you need any sort of prayer or encouragement, then why not rely on your friends? Why not rely on those who say very plainly, very boldly, lean on me. Lean on us. If you need to lean on those who should be the most trustworthy, the most non-judgmental, kind and supportive in all the world, I don't know if you believe that we'll be that for you or not, but I give you this challenge. Give us a chance. Give us a chance. Come right now as we stand and as we sing.